welcome everyone. Thanks a lot for joining us today. We're going to walk through some of the do's and don'ts and steps for preparing for a successful migration to AWS. I'm joined here with Lance, as you can see, and as we're going to go through the presentation, just feel free to jot down any questions you might have in the questions panel on the side of your screen in the GoToWebinar control panel. And we'll be sure to answer them towards the end of the webinar. Want to hope that everyone sticks with us till the end. We get a special migration offer for folks. And I think with that, we can get going. All right, so we're going to start with some introductions. My name's Scott Goldberg. I manage our pre-sale solutions architect team here at Mission Cloud Services. I guess a little bit about me. I'm a cloud architect by trade. I'm a big automator, so anything I have to do more than once or twice, I'm gonna write some automation for it, and that sort of goes from the business side of things and my work, but also to my personal life as well. So that kind of dovetails into I'm a smart home and 3D printer enthusiast, so I love to tinker, and I have over 8 years of experience working on AWS and migrating workloads to the cloud and just working with folks throughout their journey. So it's good to meet everybody. Lance.
Hey there, everyone. My name is Lance. I've been at Mission for about 6 years, primarily in engineering and ops related roles, but my background is in kind of traditional IT, kind of came up as a sysadmin, and over the course of time have been learning how to code, and I've been kind of moonlighting as a software engineer and a developer, right? So kind of tinkerer, like Scott said. I love building websites and services and scripting and just writing code and messing around. When I'm not working or kind of coding something, I like to cook. So a bit of a chef, but I've been in the technology industry for about 10 years in various roles. And these days I support customers in our pre-sales process here at Mission.
Cool, thanks, Lance. So I'm going to kick it off with just a few slides about Mission, who we are, where we come from, and what we do, and then we'll kind of move into sort of why migrate to AWS, some of the pitfalls for doing so, and then some of the awesome programs that and sort of structure that AWS and Mission puts behind it. So again, just wanted to start off with a little bit about who Mission is. We're an AWS Premier Consulting Partner and Managed Services Provider. So what does that mean that we do? As a partner to AWS, we offer a comprehensive set of services that span the entire cloud journey. So you can kind of see here in the diagram from the architecture phase when you're trying to figure out if you're ready for migration to the cloud, and even if you're already there, what kind of things should you be doing next, through the actual migration phase itself. So we've done many migrations to AWS and helped a lot of customers in getting from where they are into the platform. And then once you're in the cloud, we can help by managing your environments from 24/7 monitoring and alert response to continuous security and DevOps consulting along the way. And then finally, an important thing for everyone on AWS and in the cloud in general is just to make sure that you're optimizing on the platform. So we help customers continually evaluate their environment, helping from a cost perspective to ensure your infrastructure is sized appropriately and your dollars are being spent in the most efficient way. Like I said before, Mission's a premier consulting partner, so that's the highest partner tier you can have with AWS. It takes a lot of effort to get that certification, so we're really excited to be one of the few. As you can see, Mission has a number of different AWS competencies as well, so that means that we've been thoroughly vetted by AWS in these various areas. We've submitted case studies and proof of projects and customer satisfaction and sign-offs. So again, it's taken a lot of effort, but we're really proud to show these off. We also have a competency in a few different verticals, so like healthcare and life sciences and SaaS, and we've also have some newly acquired ones in the data analytics space as well. So I want to talk real quick about some of Mission's most recent stats. We have over, if you know us, or if you've already known us, we've grown quite a bit in the last few years. We have over 260 employees now with over 100 AWS certified engineers across our technical teams. So since the pandemic, we've gone 100% remote. So we now have coast-to-coast coverage and anywhere in between. Well, we aim to be an extension of your team. So we're there where and when you need us, and we'll move at your pace or faster. and offer a number of services that allow you to focus on what it is that you do best without getting dragged down by your infrastructure. So we're also AWS only. It's all we do. So when you bring your AWS migrations and projects to us, you can definitely count on us to know what we're doing. So why migrate, right? Why should you be looking at moving your on-prem infrastructure to AWS? There's a number of reasons why companies would want to migrate their IT environments to the cloud. A few of like the major benefits are really improved agility. So with things like elastic scaling, a broad containers offering, and diverse range of different platforms available, on AWS, companies can really achieve increased agility without sacrificing any of their performance needs. Better cost efficiency, so optimizing spend and governance on the platform is really easily accessible and can help you achieve powerful savings. And it's really also something that a partner can help a lot with. Faster development, deployment, so CI/CD pipelines, right? Using a native AWS services or integrations really can help shorten development cycles, reducing time to launch. And then longevity. So as your company grows, AWS can certainly accommodate your evolving needs and scale and priorities, as they're probably growing fastest of all. So you can also see on the right, there's a few additional quantifiable benefits too, including ones that will make your finance and security teams excited. So as we've enabled hundreds of migrations to AWS, a number of decision patterns have emerged. We just wanted to point out, like, there are 4 discernible decision patterns that we've seen. First, on the top left, you're looking at like the CIO or CTO, the person who owns your business application decisions. This person's usually in charge of the decision to, do we develop in-house? Are we going to modernize an older application? Are we going to move to, migrate to a SaaS platform? Are we going to move to the cloud? Those types of things. And it's important to understand where and how you want your applications to end up. Second is really whoever runs security at your organization. So as the CIO is making application priority decisions, the transformation or modernization of those apps is driving modernization of security to a cloud-first model. So that means really taking a step back to revisit older on-prem approaches to security, and that might mean a move away from hardware appliances and a move to cloud models that's going to use AWS accounts and organizations, and working with various ISVs who might lead the market in that space. Third is whoever's going to own your company's data, right? So they're receiving data streams like never before. I think data storage is one of the biggest things and reasons to potentially move to a cloud platform. Is you're only paying for what you need and you're not looking to over provision in that sense. So the art of the possible in the cloud is so much more flexible and scalable compared to on-prem. That we see many companies make data their second highest driver for using AWS after developer productivity. And then finally, the bottom right, you're looking at your VP or director of infrastructure and operations. They're going through substantial process and people skill change. So as the team has to adopt to new cloud first tools and modernize applications using new tools like serverless, containers, different SaaS apps. This team's looking to modernize both their tooling, but also really their knowledge and skills as well, so that they can help reduce costs by also remaining agile in the process. So in terms of setting the stage for a migration, these are sort of the 4 main tenets that I think we're looking at. The first is really culture. So culture is going to play a huge part in your migration. Your team really needs to be aligned around why you're looking to migrate. Is it to save costs? Is it to increase developer agility? Is it the ability to experiment and build on a differentiating product faster than maybe one of your competitors? Having the why in mind really means that you can push through when you encounter challenges, because you're sort of backed by the premise of why we're taking all of this on. And that sort of that team commitment really should include everyone across the organization. So that's from management to your sales teams to marketers to the folks actually obviously in the trenches and building your product or application or service. And so understanding that product development might be affected until the migration is complete, right? And so, getting everyone on the same page there is really going to be super important. And obviously knowing the value and agility that will come from having that workload running on the cloud in the future is definitely something to get behind. So secondly, to be successful you really need to set a good timeline. So there might be an external factor forcing the time constraint, or it might just be an internal deadline where we want to get this done because we want to show progress to our board or something like that. So having an aggressive time constraint with really can enable your team to move faster than it already would because everyone's sort of rallied behind a particular goal. Third, again, training and developing your builders. You'll hear this, I think, throughout the course of our talk today, but we really want to work on upskilling the team as early as possible. So there's tons of resources online for AWS training, AWS certification. There's lots of third-party training tools, et cetera. And then, we as a partner, we do a lot of work training up our customers, sort of key stakeholders, and enabling them and teaching them how to use the tools and services that are available for post-migration operational support. And then, last is sort of, again, documenting, monitoring, evaluating, and iterating. So it's important to really keep track of what you've done, learn lessons along the way, make changes where you can, pivot early and often, and then get to a place where you can kind of work through a repeatable process. So as I said on the last slide, training and developing your internal team is of utmost importance. 65% of companies don't have the people or technical knowledge to execute on their AWS objectives. And over 50% know that their teams could be spending more time on things that would really be more strategic to their business. And so again, just to highlight, that's why it's so important to understand the common pitfalls and get ahead of them so that you can maintain your focus on the things that only you can be doing. So when looking at a potential cloud migration, for companies large and small, it can be fairly difficult to get executive buy-in when there isn't really a catalyst event pushing you into it. So it's easy to justify a cloud migration when your data center is closing down or your aging hardware starts to fail. But seeing the benefits of cloud computing, especially when it comes to financial ones, can be a bit more elusive and generally require some effort in advance. And so there's a number of barriers to getting to a place where a migration can sound feasible to you, like timelines, performance requirements, workload complexity, legacy applications, and also having nobody at the company anymore who knows how any of these things run. And that's why Lance is going to talk a little bit about Mission and AWS's migration approach, because we can help you work through your inventory, estimate costs and timelines, validate your preparedness to support such an endeavor, and then help you kind of work through how the mechanics of actually getting to that point. So, things like dependency mapping and various, performance and sizing requirements for your applications, and looking through the modernization paths that exist, right? So, and we're happy to sort of work through the pros and cons of all of the above and help you determine, am I going to just lift and shift everything? Is that the right move for you? Or are we better off taking the time and looking to move to containers or rewriting the application? And a lot of that comes down to, again, just kind of knowing what your internal team structure looks like and how much time you have to get this done. All right, so I'm going to pass it over to Lance now. Talk a little bit about AWS's migration acceleration program and sort of how Mission runs such an engagement.
Thank you, Scott. Alrighty, so the Migration Acceleration Program, we call it MAP. It's essentially a framework that AWS has put together that helps business, kind of formalize the process of migrating, kind of provides a blueprint that we follow to the letter when we're working on these migrations. And it's typically done in a few different phases. The first is called assess, and that's essentially taking the time to model out the costs of the infrastructure that you're planning on deploying on AWS. And then here we get into the evaluation of what sort of technologies we're going to adopt for the future state. Because really, AWS can act as a data center for your environment, but that's not typically the most effective way to run your systems on Amazon, right? So it's better to take advantage of some of the cloud native services and functionalities that AWS offers so that you can better integrate your application, get better security, reliability, and scalability. So, sometimes for a lift and shift migration, we're really just looking at the actual hardware requirements, like how many CPUs, how much memory, how much storage does this workload support today, so we can get an assessment of how much that sort of system might cost on AWS, but there's also evaluating what the system would look like if it were modernized. So if we were to take the cloud native approach and integrate different AWS services, what services would we leverage for this workload in particular, and how can we model the costs for that workload as well. So a lot of this kind of upfront work on not only just looking at the costs for operating the workload, but really evaluating what else will need to change within the organization. It's a lot more than just redeploying some virtual machines. It's process and procedure and kind of that culture that Scott was alluding to. That's really a big part of these migrations, and it kind of requires everybody to be on the same page in terms of how things are going to work going forward when after migrating to AWS. So after that assess phase, we go into what's called the mobilize phase, and that's essentially the actual hands-on implementation. So we've got different slides that highlight each phase, and this is kind of the overview, and I'll just kind of briefly summarize these different phases, and then we'll talk more about each of them in depth. So I'd already talked about assess a little bit. The mobilize phase is where we get more into the hands-on implementation, and here we're actually working with our customers to then take their actual applications and workloads and redeploy them or rehost them on AWS. Typically, a big part of this is not only migrating data and workloads and redeploying services. A bigger part is on kind of formalizing the AWS account structure and security. There's a component of this where it's not acceptable to just have one single AWS account where all of your systems will live. Organizations need more of a structured approach consisting of many different AWS accounts and having a strategy for how their users and contractors and vendors will be able to access the environment. So kind of formalizing the access strategy and how we're going to implement authentication and authorization, how we want to secure and harden the AWS platform. We typically call that landing zone. And that's typically step one in that mobilize phase, is determining how we want to structure the AWS accounts and what sort of security services we want to work in for that particular customer. And following the mobilize phase, after we do this initial hands-on work, this kind of varies depending on each customer and their timelines and the workload. There's a lot of different factors. Typically, Mobilize is intended to be more of a lift and shift migration. It's just purely getting that AWS landing zone built, getting some of the foundational infrastructure put into place, and then we follow up with the third and final phase, which is migrate and modernize. And there is essentially where we want to transform the workloads, rather than just running on a bunch of compute hosts and virtual machines, see if we can work with a customer to refactor applications and redesign the architecture to take advantage of those cloud native services. And rather than kind of hosting everything yourself as a virtual machine, leverage some of the services on AWS that gives you all that scalability and reliability. All right, so now we're going to kind of talk about each phase individually. So I provided a summary on assess already, and just to kind of recap there, it's an assessment to make sure that there's alignment with the team, and this is really more of kind of a formal strategy sort of phase where we want to work with customers to understand their current processes and procedures, and meet with the different stakeholders and teams to get an understanding of what we recommend to get the organization ready to operate their systems on AWS, because it's a little different than running in a typical data center sort of environment, and a lot of kind of mindset shift rather than trying to deduce or determine like capacity and like how much compute and storage you may need down the line. These things are a lot more flexible and elastic on AWS, and so some of the concepts that are introduced are the ability for auto scaling. You'll have servers and compute instances coming up and down and getting load balanced, and so rather than like static machines, things become more pools of compute where hosts can join and leave clusters, and they're just kind of different, just a different way of operating. And rather than maintaining that static list of servers, trying to kind of define the infrastructure as code and use tools to kind of programmatically manage fleets of compute instances, and then also just like systems in general. But kind of the first part of this assess phase is a migration readiness assessment. And that's typically where you'll get on the line with myself or Scott or another SA on the team. And we go through this framework, and it's essentially like a question and answer format, but we want to try to meet with our customers and understand that underlying business case, because everybody's going to have different reasons for why they may want to move to the cloud. The ops team will want that reliability, that self-healing capability for auto scaling instances to, just the system will fix itself. Finance teams might want the cost benefits of only paying for what you're using, rather than trying to provision capacity for future growth and paying for storage and compute that's not necessarily being utilized. Security teams may want the ability to kind of better streamline their security processes and procedures. One thing I tell customers is that when you're on the cloud, everything is an API, and so that greatly enhances your ability to secure and harden and monitor and log your systems. You're able to basically funnel everything into some sort of audit log and activity and capture those things. So there's, even though it can be a daunting task, there's a lot more capabilities to automate your security and your overall security posture. So in this migration readiness assessment, which is actually kind of that part of what the offer that we are going to provide later on at the end of this, we also go through the exercise of determining costs for the workload. And so that, sometimes is a manual effort of an SA designing an architecture that we think will suit the needs of the workload. And making a calculation by hand. Other cases, we are able to use certain tools that will automatically pull this information from existing environments. There are many platforms available that will hook in to an existing environment, and through different collectors, it might be like a server agent that gets deployed for this platform. It might be a standard like SNMP, metrics collection. But there are different mechanisms that can be used to basically evaluate a set of systems that you may have on premises or in a data center or colo today, and make a determination of what that system might cost on AWS. And then with the ability for you to do like reserved instances and spot instances, there's all these financial levers that you can pull on AWS to kind of work that billing angle and get your bill down, essentially. We account for some of those things as well. So if you know that you'll need a certain amount of compute and storage, and you're likely going to use certain services, we can help plan the cost for those things and getting reserved instances and kind of getting a plan. And really, that's the overall essence of this whole phase. It's getting a plan, because a lot of times people feel overwhelmed by the amount of options that are present, because there will be 1,000 different ways for an organization to deploy a workload to AWS. All different technologies that can be mixed in, different ways to do it, and it can be a pretty daunting task. So really what we're here to do in this assess phase is make a formal recommendation, right? So based on our experience, here's our opinion of what we think that you should do. And it's a pretty valuable exercise for everyone across the board who participates in the assess. And typically customers leave this phase with a good understanding of the why, the how, and the what. And it's really kind of a step to unify the customer's internal teams and kind of help them build that strategy, because it's more than just virtual machines and technology. At the end of the day, it's businesses and people and process and procedures. And so this first phase of MAP is geared towards defining that and helping customers have a better understanding of the benefits that they'll get from working with AWS and a partner like Mission. One thing it's highlighted in this slide, I'll call it out real quick before we go to the next one, is this cloud adoption framework. So that's kind of what I've been alluding to as I'm talking about this assess phase. But really, what we're here to help organizations do is champion this cloud adoption framework and champion a lot of these concepts that are introduced when we're in a cloud environment. It's like cloud native tools and technologies, things like containers and serverless, automated governance, that's all kind of in line with the benefits of moving to the cloud. So we're here to champion that as well, and that's something that we're striving to do in this assess phase. Let's go to the next one, Scott. Yeah, so typically it's kind of a two-pronged approach. One side is the technical requirements. It is important that we understand kind of the full stack involved. If you have a product or a business that's running on certain technologies, it's important that we understand what the technologies are, how these systems intercommunicate and operate, and what kind of tools make up the ecosystem today, and additionally, like, what are the pain points with managing this system and the tools, because every organization has some sort of tool or system that they depend on for essentially to do and conduct business. And so it's important that we understand what the technology is, and get a thorough understanding of the full stack and the full picture. But aside from the tech, it's also important for us to understand the business requirements. One of the most common things I hear when talking with customers is there's usually some looming deadline. There is a co-location which, the expiration date is coming up soon, and the business is considering renewing, but then they're also considering just moving to the cloud, or like hardware refreshes, things like that. There's usually some deadline involved, or just other requirements like availability and uptime, from a business perspective, or keeping an SLA or SLO to your customers. So this is a big part of it as well, understanding what the business needs from this cloud move, more so than just what a technology team needs implemented on the cloud. And so this also decides a lot of the future efforts as well. One thing that comes up a lot is organizations, running in a data center or on premises somewhere. They have a production system that they cannot tolerate any downtime, because when the systems are offline or databases can't handle transactions, they're missing out. They're losing money essentially. And so sometimes that will dictate how we go about a migration. For some systems that maybe can tolerate some downtime, we can migrate in a particular fashion. We can export databases, stop writes, and then import databases and resume writes on the new systems. But that's not necessarily feasible if you have a large database, and that exporting and importing will take several hours, and you're looking at hours of downtime for a system. So decisions like that will impact the plan for migrating. Right. So in a scenario like that, now we need to consider database replication and building out the capability just to begin syncing data ahead of the migration, so that we can kind of just do a differential sync on the other end to get the systems caught up, and that we're kind of continuously transferring data as it comes in. So just kind of the business requirements still affect the migration plan and how things are implemented moving forward. So those are the two main important things to consider. And then going back to that cloud adoption framework concept, it's very important to us that we work with customers to champion these concepts, because when we can get alignment on it, the internal stakeholders can become champions for these, adopting this cloud model. And it's important that we build out this sort of understanding and this, I guess, like a passion for these concepts. my background is primarily in ops and engineering, and working in like a site reliability capacity, and my biggest kind of motivator for operating these cloud systems and having this DevOps SRE mindset is around like the availability and like the health and state of my systems, because I used to be on an on-call rotation and I did not like getting called in the middle of the night. So now it's imperative to me that when I design a system for a customer, that it is self-healing, it is can automatically fail over if need be, and then I've built in all these mechanisms that make it very resilient to outages and incident, and then I'm building that kind of mindset into my systems. And it's more than just doing it at an infrastructure level. It happens at the application level, and all throughout the different parts of the stack, right? It even comes into like the networking layer. So it's kind of a mindset that needs to be applied across the board. And when you can get buy-in and other people share that vision, you really end up with a more solid, a better engineered system that is fault tolerant and resilient, and can scale to meet demands, but can also fail over when a region goes down, or an availability zone becomes unavailable, or an upstream API is unavailable. Like, it's important that the concepts apply to more than just simple infrastructure, and it's applied at every single layer. Right, and that really, you need a team behind that, and people to drive that forward within the business, because it needs to happen from the inside rather than just like an outside partner like Mission to want to champion that. Let's go to the next one. So another kind of concept that we refer to a lot that was developed by AWS is the well-architected framework. And here it's kind of outlined as the well-architected way. And that, I like this subtitle, doing it right the first time. I tell customers a lot, measure twice, cut once, that kind of carpenter adage. But these are the pillars within this framework. And if you've done any research on the topics, this should all be familiar to you. But it's essentially operations, security, reliability, performance efficiency, and cost optimization. So really, if we kind of dissect a migration or an implementation or a workload on AWS, we can really reduce the defining factors to how we implement the system in these lenses or with these approaches. And preferences will change from customer to customer and person to person within an organization. So me, I'm an ops guy. I mean, I take the operations and reliability of my systems, I treat those as my first and foremost priority, because that is my priority typically. Before a CIO or the security operations team, they're more concerned about the security pillar. But this is kind of the framework that we apply when designing and implementing systems for customers. And AWS's well-architected framework is a very useful framework for us to rely upon, and something that we integrate with all of our work. Next one. Okay, so going into the next phase of the migration acceleration program is Mobilize. So this is the second phase. This is after we've done the migration readiness assessment. We've gone through the assess phase. We've got the total cost of ownership built. We've got the business strategy defined. We've got internal alignment with the teams, and everybody is not only geared up to migrate to AWS, but they're hyped. They're excited to do it. In the Mobilize phase is where we're actually making that a reality. So now we're building out that landing zone, like I was talking about, that multi-account structure. It used to be, when AWS was first built, that you had one single account and you would deploy all your systems into it. Didn't matter if it was development, staging, QA, or production, you had one AWS account. And then over time, it started to become an issue as there were more teams working on AWS, kind of starting to collide and clash with these systems. A developer may have had the rights to the whole account and inadvertently impacted a production system. And so people began creating different AWS accounts for their different environments and for different workloads. And so over time, more and more was implemented on the AWS side to better streamline this. And today, it's kind of become the standard that when we're bringing customers onto AWS, we're setting them up with a multi-account strategy and structuring them using services like AWS organizations and AWS SSO, and that we still treat their AWS platform as one entity, but underneath it, we're able to segregate and isolate accounts from one another and define policies that prevent accidental or even malicious changes or updates to the platform. So Mobilize typically starts with that kind of account structuring, but also the platform security. A lot of the account security and hardening happens through other AWS services. Some things you are turning them on and enabling a service or a collector or whatever the case, like CloudTrail is kind of the biggest example, right? You turn on a trail and it begins logging and auditing every single API call happening in every single account. And it's important that we kind of roll all these logs into a security or a logging account. There's a handful of other services that we may employ depending on the customer's workload and the type of systems that they're running there. But this is kind of the first part of the Mobilize process. Something I learned and has stuck with me coming up throughout the years is I had this professor when I was taking these like infosec courses that it essentially is security should be baked in rather than bolted on, right? We don't want to build a system and then worry about security later and come in after the fact and then secure it. It needs to be secured from the get-go, and security needs to be a core pillar of the system from the beginning of the implementation. So that's part of the well-architected framework. It's part of the migration acceleration program framework, and it's part of mission's internal framework. Everything we're doing with a security lens first and foremost, and then implementing workloads on top of that and kind of baking it in. And then more around kind of AWS accounts and security services and tooling. It's really defining the access patterns and how we're going to have users and people, machine accounts authenticating to the platform, and how we're going to provide people the ability to not only just log into the AWS console, but how we're going to provide users with API access, right? So developers may need to incorporate Amazon's API into their applications. External providers will need API access to scan accounts depending on what the platform is. If you're using some sort of monitoring platform like a Datadog or a New Relic, you may want to ingest all your infrastructure metrics in your monitoring from CloudWatch, and that's normally done through like an IAM role, granting them that platform a policy, the ability to go read your infrastructure metrics. So coming up with a strategy of how to kind of formalize that, because the last thing we want to do is spin up a bunch of individual IAM user accounts, and each with their own individual token, because what always happens is that token gets lost. It ends up in source code somewhere, and someone's able to sniff a token or a set of keys out from a developer who has unwittingly committed some private keys, some IAM user keys into GitHub. That's kind of the really common incident that we see. Aside from that, we also want to build in management tooling. In the legacy world, this was config management tools like Chef and Ansible. It's basically defining, here's my fleet of servers, this is the configurations I want them to have. And having Ansible playbooks or Chef cookbooks or Puppet manifests, some sort of tool that can manage all these systems in bulk. Because as organizations grow in size, the workloads will also kind of they correlate to the size and complexity of the organization. So it's important to have tools in place to be able to effectively manage fleets of your compute and all your databases and your caches. It's a lot of infrastructure components to have to manage, and it's important that we build in that management capability from the get-go, so you're not like wrangling a bunch of individual pieces to a larger puzzle. In addition, kind of I'll summarize the next few here, but just kind of formal IT, traditional systems administration topics like backups, monitoring, tooling, the optimizing of cost, right? So these are all concepts that we drill into during this mobilize phase and ensure that we set our customers up with appropriate mechanisms and backup retention policies, disaster recovery scenarios based on those business requirements that we were talking about before. And so this all gets kind of custom tailored to each customer depending on what they need, what their business requirements are. But this is a big part of that mobilize phase, and really the essence here is ensuring that you have the right system built the right time. Going back to that subtitle, and so all of these concepts are included as part of that mobilize project. And it's really like, if you are looking at the bullets here, the first 10 or so, it's not necessarily boilerplate, but it's the activities that we're doing for everybody, and they get custom fit for each customer. But we're not even at the part where we're taking your workload and migrating it, right? This is where we're building out your AWS account structure, setting up all the security, setting up all the backups, setting up all the management, the automated patching, tagging, making sure you're getting the credits that you need from the rest of this map program, which credits is a part of. And then we're getting into actually migrating workloads. Mobilize has this concept of a pilot workload. And what we like about that is that it's essentially a quick win. It's a way to kind of showcase, right? Everything up to now has really been theory. In theory, this application or product that we want to migrate to AWS, can run on AWS. And it's at this pilot workload migration stage of the Mobilize phase of MAP. Sorry, there's so many terms and technology, things that you'll have to familiarize yourself with. It's at this stage that we actually are now deploying your system. If you've got an e-commerce application on some PHP code and with a MySQL backend, here's where we're actually migrating your MySQL database over, or your Microsoft SQL database, and like rehosting the storage backends, rehosting the application and like the web services, rehosting the various parts of the components that make up your system and running it on AWS. And this is where it kind of comes to life for a lot of customers. One thing that's very important to us is that we don't just build some sort of black box system, and they're like, oh, Mission built this for us and we have no idea how it works or what they did. Having that kind of transparency and the clarity, to providing that sort of transparency and clarity to our customers is really important to us. We strive to build not just systems on behalf of our customers, build systems with our customers. We want them to be involved in the process and have a say. And we're kind of their we're the champion of a lot of this cloud technology, but really it's kind of a joint effort. We want to do these migrations alongside of our customers. And because of that, training is a big part of what we do here at Mission. So that'll be training on specific tools and technologies that are AWS specific. And it may be something with some just cloud concepts in general, and introducing more kind of modern DevOps related tools or whatever kind of the environment is. Because this goes beyond just kind of like DevOps and SRE, especially as a lot more companies are getting into data and analytics and machine learning. There are important concepts to keep in mind at these beginning phases, because it's important to keep in mind like future state for reasons for like data governance and how we're kind of partitioning and storing our data long term. Because we want to make sure that we build those things correctly the first time. So when you get to that phase and you're ready to start performing data analytics on your workload, you've already got the storage systems in place, and it's really just kind of a simple next step rather than going back and re-engineering stuff. So that's typically what a Mobilize project will look like. By the end of it, we've migrated a workload. We typically will start with just one workload, and workload is a term that can reflect different sizes. I mean, it almost depends on who you ask, but we really want to migrate, kind of a key component or workload of a system and use that as kind of the tester. And that it not only gets companies established on AWS, but it builds a lot of confidence with the rest of the organization because they can see, it's no longer theory at this point, it's practical. We have a system in production on AWS. And from there is kind of the planning for the rest of the systems, if more it remains to be migrated, and next steps. And from there we go into the final phase is migrate, and it's typically modernize. Here says optimize. There's some other frameworks involved here. You may see them often referred to as the 7 R's of implementation. They're listed there. Rehosting is kind of the most common use case that we'll see. Basically lifting and shifting. If you've got 200 servers as virtual machines in a data center, that will become 200 EC2 instances on AWS. And that's kind of the most straightforward way to get started and migrate a workload into AWS. But really the intention of this phase is to then capture and understand, how these systems interoperate, what is required from an application or business standpoint, and look to replace parts of that system with more AWS native services. Right, and so rather than hosting all of these just various compute elements, here's where we actually want to begin taking advantage of the more cloud native services. So if we've got a relational database today that's was lifted and shifted to AWS as an EC2 instance, perhaps we are migrating that data into an RDS instance and using some managed service for that. If we're hosting Redis cache on EC2 instances, we may migrate that functionality to Amazon Elasticache and have like a Redis component for that system. If we have a static fleet of web or application servers that are sitting behind a load balancer, we will turn that into an auto-scaling group of web or application servers that are scaling based upon the amount of load that the system's receiving. So it's really an exercise of going through each component of the system and finding a cloud native replacement for each component. And really the intention is that we can kind of modernize the system and take more advantage of those services to not only be more robust and reliable, but also save costs in some elements, because a lot of times, we don't want to ever have systems that are idle or doing nothing. If you've got a compute instance that is idling at 5% CPU its whole life, that's essentially CPU that you're not using, but you're still paying for. Or if you have disks provisioned with 4 terabytes of storage and you're only using 500 gigabytes of that storage, you're paying for the 4 terabytes of provisioned storage, but you're not using a lot of it. So it's really about kind of like streamlining and using only what you need and trying to reduce costs as well as improve the overall health and state of your environment. Right, so I guess I was diving into optimization topics already. So in some cases, this is a manual effort of optimizing. In many cases, though, AWS has tools and capabilities built in to inform you when things are not optimized, or they could be more efficient in their usage. One of the biggest things is that organizations will start using Amazon S3 as their object storage and start dumping a bunch of data in S3. But out of the box, there's different tiers of storage available on S3, and most customers are just using the default, when really there can be a lot of savings made from leveraging different tiers. And there's actually a capability within S3 to do intelligent tiering, where AWS will scan the objects in the bucket and determine based upon the usage patterns, what tier would be a good fit for each object. And so it's a way to kind of automatically shift the data around and kind of re-tier each object. And you can get a lot of cost savings just from that exercise alone. Another kind of thing is around the tuning, right? So that may be compute instances, it may be database or cache instances. Maybe you're using like Elasticsearch or OpenSearch. Doesn't really matter the technology. The underlying concept is, if the system is being underutilized and it's kind of steady, it's idling at low levels, you're essentially paying for computer storage that you're not using. And so really those are things that we want to scale down. And one of the whole benefits of the cloud in the first place is that you don't need to, if this was a hardware situation, you can't really, scale down if you're in a data center. You've already purchased these servers. But the whole concept with Amazon is you can kind of just tune and adjust your whole system on the fly. So if things are scaled too large, you just scale them down. Or you stand up a new one at a smaller scale and just repoint your system to the new one. There's many ways to go about this, but this is really an exercise that we work with our customers to better understand their systems and environments and help them do this optimization process. And really what this is doing is optimizing the bill and trying to get that thing as lean as possible. Cool, thank you, Scott. So after migration becomes its own set of challenges. One thing I tell customers a lot is that regardless of where your system is hosted, there's this notion or this concept that it's always going to be in a state of degradation. No system will run until the end of time. It will break down eventually. Your operating system will need patching. The libraries that your application will depend on will change. The libraries that your libraries depend on will change. There's all these like different mechanics that come into play. And even if you were to like image a machine running a particular application, at some point in time, your system will become legacy, it'll become deprecated, and you're kind of in a constant state of shifting and changing and morphing the environment. And so it's important that you have the ability to quickly and easily change parts of your system without being like tied or coupled into legacy components. And so this kind of post-migration slide is intended to detail some of the tools and concepts that are important to keep in mind. So rather, instead of just purely migrating to AWS and now the workload is there, there are things to consider after the fact. How do we manage the state and security of the workload going forward? How do we provide the governance to allow teams to operate at scale, but do so in a safe and effective manner? How do we report on the state and the security of our overall system? How do we track and manage incidents? How do we patch our containers and machines and manage databases and things like that? How do we ensure that the individuals within the organization comply with our security framework and policy? Because it's one thing to define it on paper, and it's another thing to enforce it in an actual environment and like either prevent people from making certain changes or actions, or have some sort of enforcement layer on top of that. So there's all these kind of concepts that come into play, and really it's more of like an internal business and process challenge. But AWS arms organizations with all these different tools to take these challenges on. Some of these things that are highlighted here are tools that we implement on our customers' behalf every day. Sometimes they are third parties. Most of the time, Amazon provides the tools upfront as just part of using the platform. Systems Manager, called out in that second bullet, is really important tool for organizations to get familiar with. It provides a whole host of automated patching capabilities, fleet management. You're able to kind of bulk manage your systems in one place, and also like inventory each system, what packages are installed on it, and you can even define like automation and runbooks as part of the service. Service catalog is another big one that we see. So for teams who are standardizing on the cloud, one concept that comes into play a lot is infrastructure as code. Rather than having an individual log into a console and click buttons to create some sort of system, we call that click ops. That leaves people without an understanding of what was set up and how or why. And what we've seen is that systems that are created and managed manually have a tendency to break as people make changes, and changes aren't documented anywhere. So really the model that we see being the most effective to manage systems in the cloud is through infrastructure as code. And there's a handful of tools that do that. Amazon has their own built-in tool, CloudFormation. We do a lot of implementations in Terraform. Some customers are using tools like Pulumi and CDK. And Service Catalog is an AWS service that gives customers the ability to do essentially self-service. Teams are able to go into Service Catalog and point and click different architectures that are going to drop in ready and out of the box. So if you're looking at deploying some Microsoft Active Directory stack for your enterprise, that can be something where there's an automated CloudFormation template and Service Catalog that somebody can just drop into an account, and it'll automatically hook into your existing forests and do that trust relationship. Okay, we're nearing the end of this webinar, so I'm going to kind of summarize here with the do's and don'ts of migrating. So make sure you understand why you're moving to the cloud. A lot of times customers want to do it because it seems like the cool thing, like let's move to the cloud and start using Kubernetes. It's not always the right decision, but in many cases it makes sense. Make sure you've got that organizational alignment. Everybody should be on the same page. They may have different reasons for it, but everybody should be in alignment on migrating to AWS. Sorry, dogs are barking. Make sure you have an understanding of your costs, right? Don't just dive head first. Make sure you fully understand, how much is going to cost you in the future, and kind of the general architecture for your system. Make sure to follow frameworks like Amazon's well-architected framework. It's really the blueprint that we follow for all of our customers, and it's very important to keep these things in mind ahead of time. Otherwise, you will hit the pitfalls that thousands of other organizations have run into trying to do it on their own. Documentation. I'm big on this one. The more documentation you have to explain and show designs and dependencies, the better off everybody will be. When systems kind of live inside of people's heads and there's just everything is gone off of tribal knowledge, it can become very difficult to do those knowledge transfers or share that sort of information. So documentation is very important. And kind of the last one for the do side is find a partner to help. And it's kind of shameless self-plug because we're a partner and we want to help you. But we do recommend it. I would recommend it to anybody, even if I wasn't at Mission, because you can get a bench of experts who have done these migrations before and can provide that valuable insight and kind of prevent you some hangups or pitfalls that you may run into. Scott, you want to do the don'ts?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, don't take on too much at once, right? So like Lance said, and that's sort of the key to how we go about doing Mobilize is really like, let's pick something that's going to be impactful to you, something that both isn't going to be too complicated, but also isn't too so easy to move that it's not going to be indicative of how the rest of the migration is going to go. So pay attention to those 7 R's, right? Those various migration patterns and paths. Don't overplan or over-engineer. It's easy to get stuck in analysis paralysis. We go around in circles a lot about, what about this? What about that? What about this? What about that? You don't have to live in this environment forever, right? And that's sort of the beauty of the cloud is you can change things as you change your mind or expand to different geographies. It's very flexible and extensible. So you don't have to know 100% of where you need to end up before you get started. Don't neglect security. Again, security is probably one of the most important things. Amazon manages a lot of it for you, and there's a lot of awesome ISV partners out there that you can take advantage of. But it's still a mostly self-service model, so you are responsible for security at the end of the day, and making sure that you're making decisions with that in mind is incredibly important. And then we have costs on both sides of this, but don't look at cost optimization as a reactive task. So it's definitely an ongoing thing. It should be part of your workflow, your post migration operations. You should be looking at it regularly and often, because you're both looking at room for optimization, optimizing your workload and performance and workflows, but also from a cost perspective as well. I know we're right up on time, so just wanted to call out, special offer, and there's a link here that you should go to for a free migration readiness assessment. So, you'll get on a call with Lance or myself or someone else on our awesome team, and we want to go through a lot of the stuff that we've kind of been hammering on throughout this presentation. So happy to help, happy to get engaged. If you're not ready for that sort of first step of diving in, we're happy to get on the phone and just talk with you all about what some of your hopes and dreams are for your organization and your technology footprint. So there's definitely a lot of different ways for us to engage. Hopefully you found all this information helpful, and if you do, there's a quick poll here. If you're ready for scheduling a complimentary migration readiness assessment, please feel free to fill it out. And we are 100% more than happy to get engaged with you all and see where we can help. Cool. Well, appreciate the time, everybody. Thanks a lot, Lance. And we'll see y'all on the next one.
See you, buddy.